Hi everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining me. My name's Segedin. I'm the head of digital marketing at Wild Brain Spark, and today I'm going to be talking to you about three digital trends that I think would be interesting and maybe a little bit of inspiration for you to look at for your digital marketing plans for 2022. So just a little introduction to who we are. I don't expect too many of you know about Wild Brain, but we are a children's and family entertainment company based out of Canada, and we also have offices all around the world. We cover everything from content development to production to distribution, brand building, as well as licensing. So Wildbrain Spark, we are the digital hub of Wildbrain based out of London. We run the largest kids and family AVOD network on YouTube, AVOD being advertising video on demand. And we work with brands and companies, and we work with our own internal brands as well to build out sort of digital experiences for children. We run ad networks. We do a lot of digital first production as well. And some of the biggest brands that we work on that you've probably heard of before are things like Teletubbies, Peanuts, and the Night Garden. We also make a few shows for Netflix as well, such as Chip and Potato. And a little bit about me. So I joined Wild Brain back in January, and I'm heading up digital marketing here at the company. It's a new role as we look to expand our digital and brand offering. I came from 6 years at BBC Studios, looking after digital marketing and digital publishing for our factual portfolio. And before that, I spent a number of years working in the travel industry. So today I want to go over, like I said before, three sort of thought starters for your marketing plans. Um, and this will cover everything from YouTube over to TikTok. But I think while I've broken this out into sort of maybe the generation where this focus could benefit the most, I'd say here there's a lot of you for you to use, no matter who you're working with. So I think some of you may have seen a slide like this before. This graph sort of gets refreshed every year, and this is what's happening every minute of the day on the internet. And the reason I wanted to show this to you is I think it highlights quite nicely sort of the demands that are on both our audience and us as marketers. So first, it highlights that every single year there is just more and more content, more and more platforms, more and more distractions that we have to fight against and find our place within. And also, as marketers, it means there are so many more options for us when it comes to spending our marketing budgets each year. And I think the main takeaway, which sort of covers everything I'm going to talk about, is that in this world with endless platforms, more and more formats, knowing your brand, your business objectives, and your audience is more important than ever before. We can't be everywhere at once, but when we choose where we want to be, I think having all that information at the core of everything is even more critical. So the first group I'm going to talk about is Generation Alpha. So this might not be familiar to a lot of you, but they are well within our wheelhouse here at Wild Brain and Wild Brain Spark. So this generation is generally around 9 years and younger. Um, they are what we've called the streaming generation. So here at Wild Brain Spark, we created a report this last year. It's available to download online for free. And it sort of breaks down how we reach this audience and the types of things that are important to them, and also what it means to reach them. So, one of the most important things for reaching this audience is quality and being trustworthy, as you'd imagine. So, we're not just speaking to these under nines, we're also speaking to their parents. And we saw in the last 2 years that their changing habits towards streaming over watching content like live on television has changed dramatically, and it's just sped up what was already happening. That family co-viewing on smart TV is on the rise, and that predominantly that is spent on Netflix, but YouTube and YouTube Kids is sort of in that second position. And the reason that is important is it's hard for us to reach children and their families. And with a service like Netflix and Disney Plus and all of these things coming and just growing, those subscription based video services, as advertisers and marketers, we can't get in front of them as easily through that route. But YouTube and YouTube Kids at that 61% mark, that is the opportunity where we can reach parents and their children. One thing we also found from our report is that Generation Alpha have more influence on their parents' spending decisions than in previous generations. That sort of is reflective of maybe the more open and less hierarchical way that parents work within their families these days. And as I said before, AVOD is a really good way for us to reach this generation and their parents. So just a little fact here that around 74% of UK families are now watching content with their kids every week, sorry, and 30%, the 6% are doing that daily. So obviously YouTube is a really critical space for us to reach parents and children and also families as a whole. So a few things about YouTube that if you haven't been too familiar with what's happening in the space is really good for you to understand. In January last year, Facebook rolled out their Made for Kids sort of advertising proposition. So they removed the ability to target children in the same way you might be able to on Facebook and Instagram, and made that completely based around interest. So you can place your advertising on different channels and on different types of content, but we can't sort of go after individuals at the child level. So all these changes were great. It means YouTube is a much safer space, and it means children are treated, in the way that they should be. And what that has meant, though, is that companies and content creators need to be a lot smarter and a lot more thoughtful with how they create content and advertise on the platform. Then again, in September this year, YouTube announced a series of quality principles that apply to all children's content, and it's designed to bring up sort of the more professional, the better quality, and the things that we really want children to be seeing, while also sort of not hiding or removing, but making it harder to find that lower quality content, things that are incredibly commercial, they could be misleading, or showing children behaviors that, no one or parents don't want them to see. And the reason these quality principles are good, I think as an industry, it makes us, keeps YouTube a safe space. And it means that also you're giving quality content to children and families. What this means for brands and content creators, that you can still advertise across the network, you can still advertise to children, but you need to be a lot smarter and a lot more practical about how you go about it. When it comes to making content for children on these platforms or for families, brand building and long-term vision is the key. So nothing overtly commercial. You've got to start thinking about telling a story. And I think that's where your brand and your brand values really can be demonstrated to the most that you can get out of them. And one good rule of thumb is to think, would it pass the TV test? If you were a TV commissioner and a piece of content came to you, would you consider that like good quality value editorial or more of a promotional advertising type of piece? So I think with YouTube, something to think about is there a family audience we need to reach? Are there things we can do within the advertising network? And then also, is there anything we can do organically with content, thinking about long-term brand building objectives? Then the next generation is one you've probably heard a little bit about, which is Generation Z. This is the slightly older group who are what we would truly say the people who grew up and can't remember a time before the internet. So they grew up on influencers, they grow up on YouTube, and I think that's what's critical here about talking to this audience. So they are more likely to go to social than search engines when they're looking up into researching brands. They're also more likely to discover brands via creators and influencer endorsements, and they're least likely to follow businesses on social media. And that brings me to YouTube Shorts, which is something I'd imagine not too many companies are still maybe a bit wary of going onto YouTube. It is in the past has been quite a time heavy and resource heavy platform to create content for. But I think YouTube Shorts is a really interesting proposition, particularly if you're reaching into the Gen Z audience, because it will help you tap into the community. There are an existing network of influencers and creators here who you could partner with, but it's also a great place to potentially build out your own brand and company offering. So the reasons this is something you might want to consider, exactly what I said, the audience is there. Gen Z, this is the platform they grew up with. Their influencers, their creators, their favorite stars are on here. Also, YouTube is an incredibly strong search engine in itself. So in the past, creating long form YouTube content might not have been realistic for a lot of companies, but now with these short 15-second up to 1 minute shorts, you can sort of have a lot more room to test, and there's a much lower barrier to entry, but then you still benefit from being in the YouTube search engine, from that community and that existing audience. Also, it's a priority for YouTube, so this is something they want more and more people to start using. It's their direct competitor to TikTok and to Instagram Reels. So people publishing content into this sort of new category are more likely to be served within the algorithm. It's also, yeah, as I said, access to the creators and influencers that we know younger audiences are so inspired by. And the content can also easily transfer to, say, a TikTok account or an Instagram account you're already running. So it is real good value for money, as well as being a great place to reach this audience. The next one is millennials, who you're probably already starting to think quite a lot about in your marketing plans. They are, I guess, the first sort of digital native audience, and now are obviously growing up and having families of their own, settling into maybe a slightly more adult life. But that doesn't mean that they necessarily want to be too adult, and they're starting to reach into the TikTok generation, which I guess for a lot of us has been seen as the under 24s. There is a lot of growth happening now in that 24 plus age range. And for TikTok themselves, they are looking to age up their platform. So they are really interested in encouraging brands, creators, individuals who are going to bring in that slightly older audience for them. Um, it's also being underused by brands, I'd say. So there's a lot of room to experiment, sorry, and to grow your niche and sort of show off your brand values, what your brand knows, and to tap into the existing communities there. So I'm going to play out a few examples. If they don't play now, I will share a link. But I think a lot of the really interesting stuff that's happening here is from smaller businesses who are finding their unique niches on the platform. So this first clip is from a bookstore, and they have sort of found their way into book TikTok and are now doing like really nice and really successful, simple, short clips here. So it can stream from anything from this very simple content up to an account like Chipotle, who have really invested heavily into creating a very cute, very funny, and very of the platform TikTok account. And then the next example is another way to work with audiences that are going to tap into, to work with creators who are going to tap into our audience, millennials. So there's an increase here of, say, parenting influencers on the platform, slightly older users as well who have created their own following and are now doing sort of branded content opportunities. So this is one for a Heinz Halloween store using two of Instagram's most popular parenting and family influencers. And I guess what all of this sort of shows you is that there is a lot of room now on these social platforms with all this sort of congestion and all these various routes to finding your audience, that the key here really is knowing your brand, knowing your values, knowing what you need to achieve, and then also knowing your audience inside and out. And I think what's really exciting about the possibilities of TikTok and on YouTube at the moment with YouTube Shorts is they offer you a real opportunity to experiment and to try new things, but also to, rather than feeling the need anymore to build up our own communities from scratch, there are so many communities out there who are, overlapping with our audience either directly or indirectly, where we can start tapping into the video and the content that is being created either by our fans or by official sort of influencers as well. So I think my main takeaways and my main tips are dive into some of these new platforms where there is a lot of rich sort of opportunity and they haven't been overexploited yet by brands and companies, to get really experimental, but get to the heart of what your brand and your company really stand for, and where is the expertise you can offer on these platforms. And it's finally working with talent and influencers, using the people who have built their communities up around them and are native to these platforms as well. And I think gone are the days maybe where we need to be everywhere all at once, into being a lot more strategic and a lot more smart about where we spend our money and where we publish our videos. And that was a complete whistle stop tour. And I really just hope this has given you something to think about, and like I said, my email is right here at the very end. So if you do ever have any questions or just want to chat, I am a complete geek about all of this stuff. So always willing to have a chat to a fellow digital marketer. So thank you.